All right, so welcome everybody. This is our official debriefing from the 2022-2023 CubeSat flight experiments program. So we went to New Mexico, Kansas, and Maine in the summer of 2022, and we taught teachers from those various states how to build 1U CubeSats, similar to this right here. We then challenged everybody to send us CubeSats that they built with their students to then go on a flight. And it just so happens that the flight provider that we had available that was so gracious to take our CubeSat payloads up for us was the Perlan project. And we have Ed Warnock here from the Perlan team. He'll be able to tell us a little bit about how those flights actually went. But we wound up sending 8 CubeSats from classrooms around the country, as well as a ninth 2U CubeSat right here that I put together. And this was to act kind of like the control for all of the other experiments. So this one CubeSat has pretty much all of the other sensors that the other CubeSats had on there as well. What I'll do is I'll show you a little bit of the data that was collected from that CubeSat. If anybody has data that they have been able to go through themselves or with their students, and if you have anything you want to share, we'll have a time where you're more than welcome to kind of talk about what you guys saw in the data. I saw some interesting things myself. So if you haven't yet, maybe after I go through how I made my graphs and everything, that might give you a little bit of an idea of how to go through and maybe find some interesting things in your own data. So to start with, I'm going to share my screen real quick. And I am going to show you all a little bit of information about the cubes, where they were and where they have been. Can everybody see my screen here with the item it profile here? Got Machias Memorial High School here. Yeah.
Yes.
So this is actually Jim Lenke's student's CubeSat from Machias, Maine. What I did was I put together one of these profiles for each of the CubeSats that we sent. And Itemit is an asset tracking program that organizations use usually to they'll tag tools and such, and people can check in and check out tools, and they always have an idea where those are. I thought it would be interesting to use this system for tracking our CubeSats so that we could eventually have kind of a map of where they were, where they are, and where they'll be going. So on here, some of the interesting bits of information is I put pictures of each of the CubeSats in there, and because I had all the CubeSats apart at one point or another, I was able to take some shots of the interiors as well. So what was really interesting, I thought, about this particular CubeSat was that all students seem to have been involved in this construction, not only the engineering and science-minded students, but also the art students as well. So that was really cool. They even put a little poem on there. Now, the really interesting thing here is the locations. So you should all have access to this. I do believe I gave everybody, all of the teachers who sent us CubeSats, I gave you access to this platform. If not, just send me an email and I'll get you on there, and you can do everything that I'm doing right now yourself in class, and you can show your students. So after you click on this location section, the last scene, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the beginning date back to when I first sent out the CubeSats. So I had the CubeSats from all of you. I collected them over the course of the spring. And then I sent them to the Perlan tow planes crew. And the tow plane is called the Egret. And so they're based out in Texas. And so you can see here, the CubeSats all started at my house here in New Jersey. Then they got sent to Texas, And unfortunately, unless you really zoom in, oh, there we go. So we can see this was the location where they were all scanned in when they got to Egret. And then Egret flew them all down to South America. So I'm not sure if they stopped in Panama on the way down. When was this? So this was Friday, September 22nd. So that looks like it was on the way back. So first stop looks like where they were able to scan at least was here in Mendoza. So they stopped there. I imagine they stopped in Central America too. Maybe they just didn't have the opportunity to scan all the QR codes. But then they made it down to El Calafate, where they actually flew out of right here. So this is where the flights were taking place. And Ed can maybe fill us in a little bit in a moment as to why this location was chosen for these flights. And then after the flight campaign was done, they made their way back up through South and Central America to Texas. And then they were sent to me, where I just actually scanned them in again today. I actually mailed all of the CubeSats out yesterday. So you should be getting your actual physical CubeSats. I think the latest will be Saturday for New Mexico folks, but everybody should be getting them, it seems, mostly by Friday. So you'll have your CubeSat like in your hands. You can show it to your students and even continue using it if you want. So that's Itemit's platform. This just provides us a way of kind of keeping tabs on where the CubeSats are. So maybe before I go into looking in detail at the data, let's hear a little bit from Ed about how the actual flight campaign went down in South America.
Okay, I'll be glad to do that, Noah. May I share my screen?
Yep.
Let me share it. So thank you for building the CubeSats. It is it's the highlight of our exploration to carry CubeSats that were built by students. Pardon me, I'm battling the flu, so don't let me breathe on you. The work that you're doing is extremely important. Our chief scientist, Elizabeth, became interested in science and meteorology when she was young and a student. And Einar, the founder of the project, he was interested in aviation from a young age. This is 15-year-old Einar on the left, and he later became a NASA test pilot. So his interest as a young person led him to fly some interesting airplanes for NASA. This is the NASA lifting body, the X-24, and it was a precursor to the space shuttle. And then he became, later on, he did some test flying in Germany for the German Space Agency, and he saw these interesting colored shapes that were posted on a wall. And these are waves way up at 80, 90, 100,000 feet. And if you look at them in the evening time, they look like this. They're Perlan clouds, and that's Icelandic for mother of pearl. And so Einar's curiosity said, I want to go fly those. Now, the question that Noah brought up is, well, why do we go to the tip of South America? And the reason is that we want to have a zero emissions platform to study the atmosphere. We're doing atmospheric research, and so we don't want to leave behind any traces of engine exhaust that could pollute the sample that the instruments that you have built are taking in. So there's a couple of places in the world where you could fly a glider, which is a zero emissions airplane, and you fly them in the polar vortex. Uh, Let me go back to this slide, and this is an animation of a giant jet stream that spins up in the wintertime around the poles. One of these exists in the north, and one exists in the south. And the reason we go to the south is the mountains are lined up to create uh, giant waves that our zero pollution airplane could ride. So we surf these waves in a glider. Uh, this is a map of the waves. The red is air going up, the blue is air coming down, and the altitudes are over here in kilometers. Up at the top is about 90,000 feet. So what we do is we fly over the mountains, then we release and fly up in these waves and carry your CubeSats. And by carrying the CubeSats, what we're hoping is that we'll get another Einar or Elizabeth out of one of your classes, somebody that'll get inspired and say, I want to do more of this. So we can ride these waves, and that's what we do. We ride them up and up and up and carry them up to the edge of space. This is the airplane that we use, no motor, and your CubeSats are right back here. You can see this little knob on the top of the airplane. There's a bay in here, and we put all the CubeSats and we duct air in so that the CubeSats can take samples. This is the team this year that flew your CubeSats. This is the egret that flew it down over on the left. And then we had about 24 engineers, scientists, pilots, ground crew people that came all the way down. And they're from about 4 different countries. They're from Spain, they're from Australia, the United States, and Argentina. So these are the CubeSats being built, and then here they are down in Argentina, and this is the belly of the egret where they were carried down, and this is Elisa, who was wrangling the CubeSats. Her job was to prepare each one for flight in the Perlan, and she had them set up on her desk where she was making sure that they were all operational. So each one of them got flown, and hopefully you got some interesting data. Now the flight that is interesting is the flight in 23 is the third highest glider flight in history. And your CubeSats flew on this flight. It went to about twice as high as airliners fly. It went to 60,400 feet. So that's a long way up. I said third highest. It's actually the fourth highest flight. And so your CubeSats were part of aviation history in sending gliders where they've never been able to go before. And because of the work that you've done, we're now beginning design on possibly an unmanned aircraft, a drone that can fly in these waves, and we want to explore these giant waves in the northern hemisphere and in the southern hemisphere. And the reason for building an unmanned airplane is cost. We hope to be able to build a drone that would have room for 6 1U CubeSats. But that is the Perlan project, and our goal is that some of your students will be inspired to say they want to study science, engineering, and they want to do more exploration. So our hats go off to you, and we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for working with the kids and providing us with the CubeSats to fly. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ed. I mean, this was an amazing opportunity. As you said, everybody who was a part of this got to be a part of, a world record. So, this is amazing. Um, and for all intents and purposes, this is, right at the edge of space. These CubeSats got to experience a rather unique type of ride. This is unique even compared to the high altitude balloon missions that we often fly. The Perlin is able to stay up there for a while, and it's in such an amazing environment where that is actually happening as well. Um, did anybody have any questions that they wanted to ask Ed before we move on to looking at some of the data?
I would just like to share one thing, Ed. So I have an 8-year-old son, and I remember the first time you guys went up this year, I was driving, and he sat in the back seat on that phone, Bluetooth. Oh my gosh, they're going higher, they're going higher. Like, he was so excited, and he knows what the kids upstairs are doing, and he can't wait to get there. So it is inspiring for our younger students. Our school posted it on their Facebook page, and tons of families were logging in to watch each of the flights. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm glad your son was inspired. He'll be the next Einar Enevoldsen and invent his own project to do exploration.
All right. Anybody else have anything for Ed? Any questions or comments? All right. So go ahead.
No, you said unique. The place that we fly is actually at the edge of the ozone hole. It turns out these Perlan clouds cause the ozone hole. So where we fly in South America is truly a unique place, and the environment in which we fly is approximately that of the planet Mars.
Oh wow.
So it's an exciting place to be.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't realize that. That is really interesting. So keep that in mind. Tell your students that, they could potentially be building experiments for Mars-like conditions, and perhaps for the next Perlin flight, we can have that. Okay, so let me show you some of the graphs and the data that I was able to kind of go through from our Teachers in Space 2U. Keep in mind that this only flew on egret. This did not go up on Perlin because it was a little too big. Instead of 2 1Us going up, it would have taken up that space. So I'm going to make this available to everybody. You can look at it and you can compare your data to this. One thing to keep in mind is that there was some sort of electrical failure with our 2U CubeSat. I think after the second flight, maybe, the battery had stopped working, and so they were plugging power directly into the Arduino itself. And so when I was looking at the data from a few of the flights, it looked like there was some weird stuff going on. I'm not really confident that the data was accurate, but I did pull this data from the very first flight, and it looked all right on there. So I do feel confident about this data. Also from the 23rd as well. I'm not sure what the integrity of this data is. I'm going to compare it to some of the other days as well. But this first one from the 11th of, July, this looks to be okay. So the way that I did this is first I just took all of the data from a right from like a data.txt file that is in the Google Drive, and literally all I do is just Control A to select it all, Control C to copy it, and then I would just post it right into here. So like for example, copy and paste, and then you just click on data and you click split text to columns, and it'll automatically see that everything was separated by commas, and so it separates it like that. And then I just put in one more row above, and I just put in all of the labels. So you can see that here. Then to make a graph, you just select time and then some uh, metric that you want to graph. You go to Insert, Chart, and then there's your chart. And then I just click Chart Type. I change it to line, and then you can start, kind of changing the parameters here. So like I want my x-axis to be time, so I put time there, and I don't want that in the y-axis, so I'll remove it there. And there's my graph. And like you can go through and you can customize it as more. I like to add like the grid lines and such just to make it a little bit easier to see numbers and such. And then I just took one of the graphs from each of the metrics and I put them all in to their own separate sheet here. So yeah, so I would highly encourage you to do the same thing with your data, with your students. You can make the graphs, because looking at the data itself, it's just a bunch of numbers. It's not really clear exactly what's going on in all of this. You might notice maybe some trends here and there, but having a visual graph really kind of makes it easier to see what's going on. So some interesting things that I thought of, I saw here at least, was the comparison of the sound sensor in decibels to the particulates that the air quality sensor was able to pick up. So it seems like not that long after the sound increased, which I imagine was probably the engine either being turned on or just being revved up, maybe for increasing altitude. And you see not long after that the particulates that were detected went up quite a bit. So I imagine where the CubeSat is located in the payload bay, which is obviously behind the engine at the front of the egret, that it was able to pick up on that. Nothing else really jumped out at me. You can see from the luminosity that the payload bay was open, and then you can see where they closed up the payload bay. This is probably right around where the flight started to kick off. And then one interesting thing was the UV intensity. I wasn't expecting there to really be anything picked up by the UV sensor once it was inside the payload bay, but apparently as the flight went on, we can see that those UV readings went up. So curious as to what the inside of the payload compartment of egret looks like while it's all closed up and ready to flight. I wonder if there is maybe some sort of little opening that was allowing that UV radiation to get in there. So yeah, looking at all of these graphs, you can kind of see some interesting things. With that other flight, again, I'm not entirely sure that these sensors were all working correctly. I definitely found some like real garbled data towards the end of this recording, so I cut that out. But I mean, it looked like the other sensors were kind of working. An interesting thing to see here is that around the same time you have a drop in temperature and you have an increase in humidity. So I wonder if that means that that payload compartment was opened up there, and cold, I guess moister air was able to get in there. So that was interesting. perhaps. Yeah, I'm going to be looking at this data more closely in the coming days to see if I can kind of tease out any other interesting points. But that's the type of stuff that you'll want to look at with your students, where you see what look to be maybe like anomalies or events taking place. See if you can maybe look at various graphs next to each other to maybe determine like what event was taking place. One other thing when it comes to the making of the actual graphs to keep in mind, like, so for example, this graph in the bottom left here for decibels, what you want to do when you've got like a very small line and a whole lot of empty space is I generally will go to like the vertical axis here. I'll change that minimum value to be somewhere around where that data is. So let's try 125. That just makes it a little bit more like visual. You can see the changes a little bit better that way when you do that. So that's just a quick little refresher on taking data from the CubeSats and putting them into a spreadsheet and making some graphs out of them. Does anybody have any questions about this or any concerns about doing this with your own data?
So in this case, Noah, what you use is a Google spreadsheet, right?
Yep. Yes, this is Google Sheets. You can do all of this with Excel as well. It's almost the exact same process.
And then you downloading the data from your Arduino and then putting it onto the spreadsheet and decide the type of graph that you want.
Right. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Now, I have a question on you said that there are different sets. I didn't know they were turned on and they were recording data from the moment that you send them to Texas.
So some of them they did. So like the 2U that I made, they did that with. I haven't looked through all of the data yet. So if you go to the shared Google Drive, so everybody should have access to this drive right here. One thing to keep in mind are all of these great pictures that are in here. So make sure you take a look at all of these if you haven't already. But then also you can find your cube and you can take a look and see. So yeah, Paolo, I think this was the first set of data that I actually sent, some weeks ago. They were able to send me that first flight. Let's see if they got data from any of the other flights. Yeah, it looks like that one wasn't working. I know that, yeah, it looks like your cube was having a little bit of difficulty.
Mm.
Yeah, it looks like the first flight was the flight that was able to collect the most data for your cube. Yeah, here. So you can do that with this flight here.
Yeah. And that's data from Perlan or the egret?
That's from the egret, that one.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
and now in the logistic, so egret is flying all the way down to Argentina and is pulling behind the glider, or the glider is assembled down in Argentina. How that works?
The glider is assembled in Argentina. We send it in a seagoing shipping container. And it goes first to Chile, and then across the Andes, the highest pass in the Andes that has a road on it. So.
Oh yeah, I've been there in the Mendoza. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Yes, first Mendoza, and then it goes all the way south to El Calafate.
And when you say from Mendoza, is another flight or by truck?
It goes by truck.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing journey there.
It is.
Who is the pilot? Do you have two pilots, or how many go down there for the Perlan?
We have 4 Perlan pilots. The chief pilot is a former Air Force test pilot, and then we have an Australian pilot and a Spanish pilot and another pilot from the USA. And then the egret pilot is Arnie. He lives in Texas, of course.
Yeah, and
Very good.
unfortunately, the egret team wasn't able to make it. They're actually quite busy with another research flight that they're doing right now. But I do want to just let you all know just how pivotal they were to all of this. The egret team was really the ones that were handling the payloads. They received them, they flew them down there, they were dealing with them down there. They were actually after each flight taking the micro SD cards out, saving the data just in case something happened during a flight. You know, they didn't want to lose all of the data on a card or something. So they were working hard to make sure that your data got back to you and that your CubeSats will get back to you in one piece as well.
And the person who did the majority of that work was Elisa Vassenden, and she's a high school student. Mm-hmm. And she's the daughter of the egret pilot, and she comes down every year. This year we asked her if she could take care of all the CubeSats, and she did an excellent job.
Yes. Yes.
I have one question for you, Noah. Mm-hmm. Do you have access to our flight data so you could approximate altitude against the time?
I do not. That would be very interesting data to see.
Yep. Why don't you and I confer by email, and I'll get you those files.
That'd be great.
And you can look at instrumentation from the airplane.
Right.
And if you have timestamps on your data, mm-hmm. then we can correlate it with altitude. So if you see something interesting, not only time, but you can say, well, that happened at this altitude.
Right. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, that's perfect, because that's the big thing, is trying to figure out, oh, well, what was the payload doing? Where was it? And what was happening to it at that point in time? That'll give a lot more.
Cameron put in an altitude over time mm-hmm. on his.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he has on his.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you all have access to each other's data. So maybe even try, graphing your data in comparison to another CubeSat from the same flight. That might be interesting to see as well. All right.
Would any of the rest of you be interested in seeing the data from the Perlan? Okay. Then I'll get it to you, Noah, and
yep.
You can send it out.
Yeah, I'll share it with everybody.
I was going to say, I really wanted to have the altitude data one way or the other, so.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep. Excellent. Does anybody have any other questions or any input that they want to add? Well, if not, I would consider this a resounding success for a flight campaign. Ed, thank you again so much for providing all these wonderful teachers and their students with the opportunity to fly on your record-breaking aircraft. And I know I personally will be following closely what you guys are up to. It sounds very interesting having a drone Perlan in the future. That'll be really neat. And yeah, I will stay in touch with everybody. I will be conferring, data back and forth to everybody. And I'm going to take more of the pictures and any pictures that you may have available if you want to send them to me. I'm going to make another one of those updates, that PDF file that I had sent out with the maps of where the payloads went and where they've been, as well as some graphs and any information that you share with me, so that we have like a centralized repository. I am also going to post it all to our website, tis.org, so that you can send students there, or you can go there yourself and show folks, what this has all been about.
I wanted to say particularly, Ed, thank you for making this accessible to have the opportunity for students to have flying on the edge of space in a way, right? And make it incredibly amazing journey. And because I'm with the Space Grant in New Mexico, I'm the director of the Space Grant, and we have a network throughout New Mexico, and every state has a space hand. But I'm telling you, and you probably already know this, getting payloads to fly opportunities like this is not easy. They charge money, it's very profit oriented, and I get it. Companies need to make money. But when you put your words into what you say and you do it and you make it accessible, that's incredible. And then the time around to fly, which in other opportunities that doesn't happen. And they prioritize people who pays a lot of money. So thank you, and I hope you can keep making it work, the business model and things like that. And particularly for all the teachers here and the people who engage with the students, that we are working to find that diversity of students that and those students who otherwise wouldn't have that opportunity, and they need to be involved for the economic prosperity of the United States, to be honest, because diversity will make it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I want to thank you for being the liaison between Perlan and us, and putting the extra work always in the extra line of code or whatever it may be, and making yourself accessible like that.
Yes, absolutely. It was my pleasure. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, all of this is kind of a bit of a jobs program. My whole, kind of goal with this is that there are second graders that have probably already decided that, they're terrible at math and they'll never be, an engineer or scientist one day. But now you and your students have all proven that not only can they be engineers in second grade or other grades, but, they've done it now. They have now flown payloads. They've now collected data. Now they're going to look at that data and analyze that data. And now they can know that they are engineers and they can continue to work towards that goal of one day, being a professional engineer or scientist or what have you. And, that whole vision of the human future in space, where we've got people living and working on, space stations, moon bases, Mars colonies, and asteroid mining facilities. These kids may have been spurred to become a part of all of that in the not so distant future by just doing this project, getting their hands on an Arduino and programming it, building a 3D printed CubeSat frame, getting to watch Perlan's virtual cockpit while they were flying over the mountains of Argentina. Any number of things throughout this whole project could have been that little spark that got that second grader or fifth grader or sixth grader or high schooler who may have had no belief that they could do any of this. Now they have that belief, that knowledge, and that experience. And as Paulo said, for the prosperity of our nation, for all nations, this type of stuff can be leading towards that. So again, thank you all for being a part of this. Ed, thank you for, carrying our payloads to the edge of space. And, we're going to keep on working on all of this. And I'm still available for any support that you all might need in looking through the data and making graphs and whatnot. So if you need anything at all, just please feel free to reach out to me.
I do have one other question.
Go for it.
I was wondering, so I'm kind of in a unique situation where the students that I did this with are in another school now. Mm-hmm. And so I am making plans to still have a meeting, kind of have a follow-up thing with them when I have all the data and I have the CubeSat back in January. But if I do have students who are interested in kind of like following, is like the Perlan website the best place? Like if there were some kids, like was mentioned earlier, who really got into like watching, I did myself. I had it going in my room the whole time. Like, but if we have students that are interested in more, like on the website, is there like contact information? Like, what if they had some questions? Who could they, I'd like to encourage them to like ask people directly if possible. Like, if possible, is that okay? Like, could they?
Oh, yes. Yep. That's perfectly fine. Just on our website, we have a place where you can email Perlan. The email comes to me personally. and then I'll pass it on to the right engineer or right scientist, and that's part of our mission is to help you.
Okay, excellent. I just think the kids, it would be cool for them to like I'm gonna, hopefully you said you were gonna record this.
Mhm.
I'm planning on sharing the little presentation that Ed did earlier with the kids because I think they would really like that, and I want them to have a way if they want to do more. I want them to have kind of an in where they can have someone to talk to or whatever. So
Yeah.
that's great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, no, that is great. A big part of what we're doing at Teachers in Space is not only the training of the teachers and the getting space into the classroom, but we want to make these connections right here between folks like Ed and teachers like you, Stephanie, so that your students have that connection to folks in industry, because that's what this is about. This is about getting more people working to realize that vision I was talking about of people living and working in space. And we need that connection between um, the students, the teachers, and the industry, so that we can get as many people in there as possible.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Did anybody else have any questions or comments?
Well, I want to say thank you again to all of you that work with the kids. You have the most important job in the world. So my thanks to all of you. We get to do fun things. We get to go to Argentina and fly airplanes and explore the stratosphere. And you do the important work with the kids.
Yep. The heavy lifting. All right. Well, if anybody does come up with any other questions or comments, you know how to get in touch with me, noah@tis.org. Any questions that you have for Ed, I could pass on to him. Also, check out Perlan's website. You can see all sorts of information about their flights on there, and you can get in touch with Ed directly there as well. And so if nobody else has anything else that they'd like to add, I'd like to congratulate you all again on a successful flight campaign. And I'm going to be looking forward to seeing some data and graphs from you all. All right. You all have yourselves a good evening. And I will, I'll let you know through email when I have this posted to our YouTube channel so that you can share it with others. All right. Good night, everybody. It's great to see you all again.
Good night. Thank you, Noah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.